Hey everyone, this is the part 3 in this series of videos in which I am talking about how to implement the dependency injection design pattern in C# and JavaScript languages. So this is part 3 and the first part was about the introduction of this design pattern, and I have talked about the basic stuff and all the conceptual things. So if you haven't yet watched the first part, then I would highly advise you to do that. But if you think that you already know about the concepts and you are just here to learn about the code example, then I guess you can skip the part 1. Also, if you want to know how this design pattern in its simplest form can be implemented in C# language, then you can do that by opening the part 2 of this series and you will see how it is done in C#. So this is the part 3, and in this part I'm going to show you how you can implement the dependency injection design pattern in JavaScript, which is running in a browser and not in a server. Although the server side code is also not going to be too different, but the browser code is easier to understand because I will just show you how to do that by using the native JavaScript APIs without using any third-party libraries. So without wasting any more time, let's get on with this video and see how dependency injection can be implemented in JavaScript. So what I will do is I will create a new file and let's just name it index.html. So the first thing that I will do in this index.html file is to add some HTML content. So HTML and then HTML5. Now we should not be really concerned about the body. All we need is the script tag. So a script. Now let me just increase the font size so that you guys will be able to see what I'm doing on smaller screens. I guess this should be enough, and let's just close that pane too. Alright, so now what I will do is I'm going to use the same example which I used in part 2 of this series, which was about C# language. So I am going to show you the steps which I am going to code. So what I will do is I will create a person class and then I will write the code to save the person details using dependency injection. So this code will be running in the browser and we will not be using any third-party libraries to make this code work. The first thing which we will do over here is we will create the class for the person and we will add a constructor to it. Now inside this constructor I'm going to add two properties, the first name and the last name. Now we are also going to provide the values for the first name and last name properties using constructor arguments. So let's just do that. First name and last name. Now if the arguments are not provided, then we should be able to switch to a default value. Okay, so to save the person details, what I will do is I will use the dependency injection pattern, and for that I will create a client and a service. The service will contain the actual code to save the person details and the client will have the information of the person object to use, and then the client will use the service to save that person object which it currently points to. So let's now create classes for the client and the service. To create the client, I'm going to create a class and let's just name it person manager. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not a function. Okay, let's just add a constructor to it. We will add more to it later. Let's just keep it empty for now. For the service, I'm going to create a class and let's just name it person data manager. Also let's add a constructor to it, although I'm not sure if we will need to use this or not. So in the person manager, which is the client, let me just write client over here, and this is the service. The person manager, which is the client, is going to hold the information, or it is going to have properties for the person object and for the person data manager service, and we are going to provide those values using its constructor. So person and person data manager can be passed using the constructor arguments, and this dot person equals to person, and this dot person data manager equals to person data manager. Actually p should be small here. Okay, so after the constructor has been used to create an object for the person manager, we can write the function to save the person details, and for that I'm just going to create a function which will be named as save person. So first we will check if the person data manager exists or not. If it does, then what we can do is we can simply call another method which exists in the person data manager to save the person information, but we haven't yet created that method, so I'm just going to do it right now. The method will be called as save person, and in the save person what we will do is we will actually save the person information. So we need to provide the person object as an argument, but we are not really concerned about how the code will work to save the person information. So I'm just going to log a message in the console what is happening or what kind of service we are using for the dependency injection scenario. So person details saved. You know what, let's just save the details to a text file for this service. So getting back to the person manager, let's call this dot person data manager dot save person, and then let's also provide this dot person as an argument, and that's pretty much it. So now how to use this client and this service? What we will do is we will create a function and we will call it save person. So let's just do that. Okay, so function save person, you know what, how to format this? All right, so the save person function will be called whenever the page will be loaded, and to make sure it gets called, I'm just going to assign it to the event listener DOM content loaded. So add event listener and DOM content loaded, and then when this event will be called, then this save person function will be called. Alright, so now in this save person, all we need to do is we need to create a new person. So var person equals to new person, and let's just provide the values for the first name and last name. So there you go, now we have a person object. Now we need to create the person manager client and the person data manager service. So first let's create this service. So var service equals to new person data manager, and client is the new person manager, which will need the arguments for the person and the service. And now to save the person information, what we can do is we can simply call client dot save person. Now you must be thinking that why do we need to create a class which is person manager and then eventually use the person data manager class to save it. We need to do it because we need to use dependency injection design pattern. Without this setup we will not be able to do that. So you will be also thinking that all of this is still hard-coded information. How can we achieve a scenario in which we can configure what service to use for our client? So to do that, what we will do is we will create a text file, and then we will write the information about the service to use inside that text file. For that I'm going to create a new text file, and let's just call it config.txt. Oh, it's already a text file, I'm sorry. Now let's just open it, and what I will do is I will write a JavaScript object notation string, and then that string will be asynchronously loaded by our JavaScript code, and then it will convert it into an object, and from that object we will read the type of service that we need to use. It's pretty simple when you listen to it in that way, but if you haven't done this before, then it could be somewhat complicated because it involves asynchronous programming in the browser. So let's just add the JSON string, and this is the type property, and this is the service, which is person data manager. Now there is another catch over here. Right now we only have a single service, but this should not be the case to use dependency injection. DI should only be used when we need to be able to switch services from the configuration settings, but right now we only have a single service. So what I will do is I will create more services, and let's just rename the first one. So I'm just going to rename it so that we can understand that this service is going to save the person information in a text file. So person data manager text file. Similarly, we can create more services, and let's just assume that this is going to save the information in an XML file, and we also need to change the messages which will be printed in the console. Let's just create another one, and I'm just going to call it person data manager SQL DB. Also in the config file, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename the default service to use the text file service to save the person information in a text file. Now we need to write the code to load the type of service string from the config.txt, and then we will create a new object of that service type, and then we will inject that service into the client. So let's just do that. So the first thing we need to do to load the service type asynchronously from a configuration file, we need to create a map, and let's just call it services. And what I will do is I will add the service types to this services object. So services, and I'm going to add the names as name of the property, and then I will assign the class to that property. Let's just add two more, and we have the XML file data manager, and we also have the SQL DB person data manager. And then finally we need to add this services object to window, so I'm just going to do that. Equals to services. Alright, now I'm going to use the fetch API to fetch the type of service which we need to use, and for that we will need to create asynchronous functions. So what we will do is we will use the async await APIs of JavaScript, which is not really available in older browsers, but this example is not for them. So let's just modify this existing code. The first thing which I will do is I will first fetch the service string from the configuration file. So you know what, let's just call it person data manager type string, and we will need another function to fetch the string of the type of service which we need to use. So async function get service type. So we will fetch the service from over here, and then we will need to write await over here because we will need to wait until the results are returned from this async function call. After we have the string of the type of service which we need to use, we will need to create the object for the service, and for that what I will do is I will use this services object to create a new object out of the type of class. This is kind of tricky, but this is important. So where service equals to new window dot services, and then we will provide the string value for the name of the property. For the type of service object which we need to create. And I guess that's pretty much it to create this service. I'm going to comment out this one. We should also first check if the service is created or not. So if service is not undefined, then we should just go ahead and create the client object and then save the person information. Now it's time to write the code for the get service type function to actually read the type of service string from the configuration file. For that, first I'm just going to create a variable and let's just call it %data_manager type string like above, and then we will need to fetch a response using the fetch API, which will read the config.txt file which contains the type of service. So response equals to await and then fetch and then config.txt. First we will need to fetch the JSON object from the config.txt file. So where %data_manager type obj equals to await response.json. This will give us the JSON object. So after that we can set the string by reading the type property from this object, and then finally we can return the %data_manager type string, which will then be used by this save person function. And that should be pretty much it. Now let's just run this code and see if it is running successfully or not, because we haven't yet run it a single time and it could be possible that something will go wrong. So let's just find out. So when I run the code, then there is an error message that await is only valid in async function. So what happened is we forgot to provide async keyword for a function which is for the save person, because we are using await keyword inside it. So await can only be used inside functions which have the async prefix with them. So I'm just going to save it and then refresh the page again in the browser. Let's just refresh it. So cannot access %data_manager text file before initialization. This is a reference error at line 15. Alright, so we are trying to access it before actually providing its implementation or definition. So we need to provide those classes above this code, and let's just do that. So I'm just going to cut and paste everything to put everything above it. And this should fix the issue. Let's refresh the page again. Okay, so now there are new error messages. So URL scheme must be HTTP. So what is happening is we are running the file directly, but what we need is we need to create a local server in which this app or this index.html page should be hosted, and then we need to run it from there. Otherwise the fetch API will not be able to read the file. So what I will do is in this VS Code I will use an extension which is open with live server. This will create a live server and we will be able to run it in a local server. So let's just click on it. So this is the live server. Now let's press F12, and what it is saying is the person details are saved to a text file. So it looks like our code is working because we were using the text file type of service in the config file, which is over here. So this is why the service which is being used is this one, which is %data_manager text file. So what will happen is this type string is being fetched from the fetch API code, and then this string is then being used to create a new service object. And then finally, if the service is not undefined, then we are injecting this service object into this %manager client, and this is where the actual dependency injection is happening. So if we were to switch to a different service without making any kind of code change, what we need to do is we just need to copy the new service name and then paste it inside the config.txt file. Let's just save it. Reload the page again. Actually, this extension reloads it again if it detects any file change. So now it says person details saved to XML file. Let me just zoom in so that you can see it. Person details saved to XML file. Now let's just switch to the third one, which is the person data manager SQL DB. Let's just paste it over here, save it. Now you can see that person details saved to a DQL. Alright, so it's a typo, not a big deal, but anyways, you get the idea how it is working. Person details saved to a SQL DB. All I'm doing is I'm just making changes in a config file, and then the service change is being detected and then it is being used by the code. So this is how dependency injection works in JavaScript. This is a very basic example, and I'm sure there are a number of ways to improve this piece of code, but my intention and motive here was to explain to you guys how this design pattern can be implemented in JavaScript language. And if you have any questions, then feel free to use the comments area to ask them. If you haven't watched the previous videos, then again you are obviously most welcome to watch them. And if you think that you like this video, then please don't forget to place a like and subscribe to this channel if you want to be the first one to know about the latest video updates. I will see you in the next one. Till then, have a great day.